Hi guys, my name is Katie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a wrap up of all the series that I've completed so far in 2018. 2018 has been a really good reading year for me. I'm at this point have read 49 books, which is more than I read in any year ever, and it's only June. Well, I thought today I would take the time to talk about each of the series that I've completed all the way through, and then I will make another video for series that I've started and standalones that I've read throughout the year, just because I only just started this channel, but I've read so many amazing books and I want to have a chance to talk about them. The first series that I read this year was Rebel of the Sands by Alwyn Hamilton. So this series has 3 books: Rebel of the Sands, Traitor to the Throne, Hero at the Fall. Rebel of the Sands is about Amani Al-Hiza, who lives in the backcountry of her desert nation. She's a gunslinger, and when she meets a mysterious foreigner, she's whisked away on the journey of a lifetime to save her country from the forces that threaten it, both mortal and mythical. This was the first YA book series that I read in the year, and I really enjoyed it. Each book I read in a day, in like 1 or 2 sittings, so I was really into them. I thought that they were just really fun. I enjoyed the mixture of like gunslinging Western culture with traditional Middle Eastern myth and legend. I thought that was a really interesting mesh of cultures that you don't necessarily see too often. I will say if I read this now that I've read a lot of other YA books, I would probably rate it lower than I initially did. I think as a whole, this series I would give a 3.75 out of 5. Even though when I read it, it was 5 stars because I was so into it, but upon further reflection and having the time to think about the story and think about other books that I've read, I would lower my rating. I just felt like in this first book, the character development fell flat. It definitely picked up in the second and third book, but overall, I thought it was fun, but it wasn't anything super unique, but it was still a really enjoyable read. The second series that I read this year was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, which has the first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, A Gathering of Shadows, and A Conjuring of Light. I even have the collector's edition of A Darker Shade of Magic that my best friend Melissa got me for my birthday, so thank you so much, Melissa. It was like the best surprise ever, and I'm so happy that I have it. So in this collector's edition, you have the cool black cover. On the front, it says Astravaras, which is the spell to travel in between worlds, which figures a huge part in this series. Fun fan art in the front and in the back. I'm such a sucker for fan art. I love fan art, so I really love this edition, and I have it displayed on my shelf. A Darker Shade of Magic follows Kel, who is an Antari, a special magician that can master all of the elements and also travel in between parallel worlds. There's 4 parallel worlds: Red London, which is full of magic; White London, which the magic is draining from; Black London, which no longer exists because the magic ate it up; and Grey London, which is our normal world with little to no magic. Only Antari are able to travel between worlds, but when Kel is on a mission in Grey London, he comes across paths with the cut purse Lila Bard, and she steals a very valuable magical item from him, and from there they embark on an adventure together. After reading this series, it is literally one of my all-time favorite series. I love it so much. It's so good, and I will literally read anything that V.E. Schwab writes because she is my queen. I will say, I think that this first book is the weakest of the 3. I would say the scope of it is a little bit less than the other 2, but it's a really good introductory into the world. I thought the character development was really good, but I would say if you get through this first book and you're not sure how you feel, definitely continue, because it is so worth it, because things just hit the ground running in book 2 and they don't stop. One of the things I absolutely adored about this world and this story is the way the representation is just built into this world. You have characters of different ethnicities and characters of different sexual orientations, and it's never like a main plot point, it's just part of who they are, and I think that that is really something special. I love when authors build fantasy worlds that kind of don't have the same stigmas that our world does, because if you're building a brand new world, why do you have to build in those stigmas it's your own world. You can do with it what you want. The world building in this was absolutely incredible. I want to go visit Red London and smell the flowery magic smell, and I need some sort of Red London candle because it's supposed to smell amazing. I also loved showing the deep brotherly bond between Rye and Kel and just how much they loved each other, even though it was in a platonic brotherly way. I don't necessarily think that we see that depth of like man-to-man platonic emotion in a lot of novels, and I thought that that was a really refreshing and cool aspect that I really enjoyed. The intensity just builds and builds over these 3 novels, and I love them so much, and they're so good, and I'm just gonna scream about it in front of the camera until you all read it because it's amazing. Obviously, 5 out of 5 stars for this series. There's also Steel Scars coming out, I think in the fall maybe, which is a comic series about Rye, the prince's father when he was a youngster, and also there's going to be another trilogy in this world, and all of our favorite characters will be back, even though if they won't be the main characters, there's going to be more, and I can't wait. Anyways, this is my favorite. Please read it. Read it. Read it! Next, we have the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer, which consists of Cinder, Scarlet, Cress, and Winter. And Winter is the only one that I have a physical copy of because I got the rest at the library, and at a point in time in my life where I have money, I will buy the rest of the series for my shelf. There's also the novella Fairest and the novella Bind Up Stars Above. In this series, it's a fairy tale retelling with a special twist. Cinder is a cyborg, and when her life gets entwined with Prince Kai, the leader of the Eastern Commonwealth, she has to go on a journey to discover her past to unfoil the plots against her world. At first, when I read Cinder, I really enjoyed it, but I was so about it, and then I continued on to Scarlet, Cress, and Winter, and I was absolutely hooked. It was so good. I just love fairy tale retellings, and I love that it has a sci-fi twist. I also really liked how Cinder took place in New Beijing, which is kind of like as homage to the original Cinderella tales' Asian roots. I actually read that story in school at some point, and I love to see where fairy tales have come from and how they've evolved over time, and I think that's why us as a society, we always just eat up fairy tale retellings. I actually took a writing seminar in college all about fairy tales. We would read different fairy tales and write essays about them and stuff, but one of the cool things about fairy tales that I think is different from a lot of other stories is a lot of the originals, like the Grimm fairy tales and all of that, are really violent and gory, and they evolved from tales that people would tell around the fire as a way of entertainment for adults, and somehow they got changed into children's stories. So I love how they're these types of stories that everyone knows, and they continually evolve over time, and there's always new retellings and new twists, and I especially loved the sci-fi modern twist that Marissa Meyer put on the Lunar Chronicles. I think it just shows how over time storytelling has changed. Is it no longer like a short little gory story, but a whole universe with 800-page long books about these characters. Another thing that I really loved about this series is how in each new book there's new characters to love as the story went on, and we had a new fairy tale that the next story was about, as well as connecting all of the new characters. I just love to see the relationships between them, and also like the new cool twist that Marissa Meyer put on the fairy tales. I will say I found the novella Fairest and the novella Bind Up Stars Above, except for the last story in that Bind Up, if you know what I'm talking about. I found them to be really unnecessary. I'm not a giant fan of novellas in general because they tend not to have much plot or really do anything from the story as a whole. So, I mean, they were fun, but like I wasn't the biggest fan. There's also a comic series called Wires and Nerve, which follows Iko and the rest of the gang, and I am really interested to pick that up because I do want to get more into graphic novels, and I've heard really good things about it. Overall, 5 out of 5 stars, a really fun modern fairy tale retelling that I absolutely adored. This next series, everyone on BookTube has probably heard about time and time again, and I'm here to tell you about it one more time, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, which has A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, my absolute fave. A Court of Wings and Ruin, and the novella A Court of Frost and Starlight. A Court of Thorns and Roses follows a Feyre who is a human who has to hunt for the survival of her family, who is poor and living on the edge of the mortal realms near the fairy realms. When she kills a wolf, she is dragged into the fairy realms as redemption for the life she took, but as distrust turns to passion, she will have a hand in breaking a curse upon all the fairy lands. Okay, I'm gonna hold up this book because this one is my favorite in the series, as is probably everyone that has read this book. I thought it was really interesting how the first and the second books in this series were just like completely different from each other. It kind of took like a big turn, but I found this novel to be just amazing. Just amazing. If you've read it, you know. So I don't want to go too far into the series just because I feel like everyone knows about it, but I will give my quick thoughts on A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is the newest novella in the series, and I feel like a lot of people have had a lot of feelings about this since it first came out. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of novellas. When I first read this, I was like, oh my god, it's amazing, because I was just getting drawn up in the hype, but now as more time has passed, I'm really like, yeah, this book was not that good. I think for what it is, you know, a book without plot, like, it's okay. There were some things in here that were just like a little questionable, and like, why are you doing that? But I am really, really excited for the direction that this series has taken, and spoilers ahead, so if you haven't read this, I guess mute until I put this down. But I am kind of done with recent Feyre's story. I think they're resolved, but I'm so excited to see where Nesta and Cassian go, because Nesta is a complete bitch and I love Cassian, and I think that they have such an interesting dynamic, and I think Sarah J Maas is at her best when she's writing about characters going through difficult situations, such as Feyre in A Court of Mist and Fury, and I think that with Nesta and Cassian, she'll be able to recapture that kind of magic that she has writing about characters in those sorts of situations, because I find that's where her writing is at its peak. But I think that this series has a lot of potential for its future. So I'm excited to read the future books. And I do need to read the Throne of Glass series eventually. That's on my TBR after I get through all the books that I already have. Next we have the Illumination Files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, which includes Illuminae, Gemina, and Obsidio. In the year 2575, a war breaks out between two mega corporations, and an icy planet in the corner of the universe is attacked, forcing Katie Grant and Ezra Mason, who broke up that morning, to fight their way onto an evacuating fleet and keep fighting the corporation that wants them silenced forever. This story is told in a really unique dossier format with emails, IMs, kind of like pictures. I also really love how it looks naked. It totally has the Files vibe, but it's told in transcripts, emails, things like that. This book series, I loved it. I've never read anything like it before. Going into this, I was really unsure how I was going to feel about the dossier format. I thought that maybe it would draw me out of the story a little bit, but it did completely the opposite. It really immersed you in what was going on, and I felt like I was in the future and I was reading these files, and I was here, and I was Katie Grant, and I was hacking into the computers and being a complete badass. I was also afraid that with it being a file type format that I wasn't going to like the characters, or I wasn't going to be as drawn to their character development or their arcs, but I found that it almost made it a little bit more personal, because, you know, we spend all day texting, emailing, that kind of stuff, and to see how the characters are texting and emailing each other in this dire situation, I think it kind of gives them more of a voice, and it almost makes it a little bit more personal. One of the other elements of world building that I really enjoyed that these two authors used was the use of slang as a world building tool, because there's all this slang that they have, which obviously the slang we use today in 2018 is much different than the slang they used back in like the 1400s. So the year 2575, there's definitely going to be some different words in use. So I thought that that as a world building tool was really creative and also really fun because I really liked the slang that they had in here. I just thought it was awesome. Overall, 5 out of 5 stars. I really love this book. If you're not sure how you're going to feel about the dossier format, I would say just give it a chance because it really is so amazing and you don't want to miss out on this book series. The next series that I read is The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater, in which we have the Raven Boys, the Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and the Raven King. Blue Sargent is from a family of psychics and she's been told her whole life that she will cause her true love to die with a kiss. In a ceremony where the soon-to-be dead come walking across the graveyard, Blue sees a boy that speaks directly to her, meaning that either he is her true love or she killed him. This boy turns out to be Gainsey, who is part of the Raven Boys from the nearby Agliombi Academy, a wealthy private school in the area. Even though Blue knows she shouldn't, she finds herself drawn to Gainsey and his friends, Adam, Ronan, and Noah, as they are on a quest to find the mysterious Raven King. Okay, when I was reading these books, I actually could not put them down. I read The Dream Thieves and Blue Lily, Lily Blue both in the same day, and I stayed up until 6 a.m. reading them, which I've never ever done before, so I think that speaks for itself. Reading the series actually feels like you're walking through a magical forest and the rain is falling softly and there's just flower petals floating through the air, and essentially this whole series reads like you're in a dream. It is just so ethereal and I just absolutely loved all of these characters and I love this whole series, and I just don't even know what more to say except read it. Obviously 5 out of 5 stars for the whole series. The next book series that I read was actually a reread leading up to the last book, which came out in May, and that is the Red Queen series, which this is the special collector's edition with the red sprayed edges, and it is so beautiful. Red Queen series is by Victoria Aveyard, and in it we have the Red Queen, Glass Sword, King's Cage, and Warstorm. And I have to say, I absolutely love the cover design for this series. The covers with the crowns, with the blood on them, it's just so cool. I love it. Mayor Barrow lives in a world that is separated based on the color of your blood. The Silver Elite have superpowers that they use to oppress the common red folk. However, when it is discovered that Mayor has powers despite being a common red-blooded person, the Royal Silver family hides her in plain sight in the Royal Silver Palace. She is drawn into this world when she is betrothed to the Silver Prince, even though she silently fights. Mare silently fights by helping the Scarlet Guard to bring down the Silver Regime. This is one of the first YA fantasy series that I've read in a really long time when I first read it in 2016. And so I absolutely loved it. It holds a special place in my heart because of that. I met Victoria Aveyard at BookCon and she was just so sweet and nice and I loved meeting her. A lot of people's complaints with this series is that it's very tropey, but I guess because I was reading it at a point where I wasn't reading a lot of YA fantasy, the tropes didn't really bother me, but also upon my reread, I found that even though there were some tropes, a lot of times I felt like the tropes were getting turned around on their head. At first when I read this book, I couldn't make up my mind as to whether or not Mare was an annoying character, but upon my reread, I found that I thought she was actually a lot more relatable. I don't know what 17-year-old thrust into this life or death situation would always make the right choices, and I think showing how she struggles with this power that she's given and these decisions that she has to make, even though she's really young, it makes for a really compelling story. I did find that this series was slow at times. I thought that Glass Sword was the slowest of all the books, but if you can push past Glass Sword, it picks up at the end of the book and then it keeps going through the last 2 books in the series. I also thought the villains in this series were really, really compelling and I liked to read about them as well. But overall, this book series just has sentimental value for me, so 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. And finally, the last book series that I read this year was Shadow and Bone, part of the Grishaverse by Leigh Bardugo, which has Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and Ruin and Rising. I have also read the Six of Crows duology, but I'm going to be including that in my June wrap-up because I read that in the month of June when I started this channel. If you want to hear some of my thoughts about that, you can check out my most recent weekly reading vlog. Nation of Ravka, which is based heavily on Russian culture, is torn apart by the Shadowfold, which is just a large stretch of land filled with darkness. But when Alina Starkov unleashes a dormant power that she didn't even know that she had, she's whisked away to the capital, to the Grisha army, the head of which is the Darkling, to try and save her nation. I thought the strongest aspect of the story was the world building. The Grisha verse is just so compelling. I really love that it's based on Russian culture because that's not very common. I also thought the magic system of the Grisha was really well thought out, with very clear limitations on what characters can and cannot do. My main complaint with the story is just the lack of subplot. It kind of was the main plot and then like really nothing else going on, and so I felt like the main plot fell a little flat because there was no subplot to support it. I also really wasn't a fan of the main characters. Like, I liked Alina and Mal, but they were just meh. They were kind of just almost like a little tropey. I felt like there was no sort of like unique characteristics that set them apart from the rest of main characters in like other YA novels. I was really intrigued by the Darkling. I thought he was a really cool morally gray character, but then he kind of slid into evil almost a little bit too quickly, and I would have liked more of him and more of the intrigue of him because I thought that he was one of the most compelling characters in the series, and so I'm sad that overall there was not more of the Darkling because I was really intrigued by his character. The side characters in the series ended up being my favorite. I absolutely loved Nikolai and Genya and Zoya, and they are going to be in King of Scars along with Nina from Six of Crows, and I'm so excited for that book to come out in January. I will say you can definitely tell that Leigh Bardugo's writing has matured a lot in the Six of Crows duology, and basically any complaint that I had with the Shadow and Bone trilogy is non-existent in the Six of Crows duology. I think that she's grown a lot from this first trilogy, and she's also able to build on the universe that she laid the foundation for in this trilogy. So I do think that, especially before King of Scars comes out, it's worth it to give this a read, but overall I would give this series a 4 out of 5 stars. And I'm so excited for King of Scars! I have this King of Scars sampler that I got at BookCon, and oh my god, just from the first 3 chapters that we get, like, I cannot wait. The plot of this book looks lit, so I need it to come out like tomorrow. Okay guys, that's it for all the series I've completed so far in 2018. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked my video and you like me. I would love it so much and I would appreciate it forever. Alright, so that's it. Have some fun, read some books, and I'll see you in the next one.